Welcome to Morbid Matters, where we talk about everything from the horrors of history to the true crime of today. My name is Miranda, and you are free to follow me on any other social media platforms. With all that being said, let's get into today's case. Judith Eva Barsi was born on June 6, 1978, to her parents Joseph and Maria Barsi. They had both immigrated to the United States from Hungary after the 1956 Hungarian uprising. At the time they immigrated, Hungary was called the Hungarian People's Republic, and anytime a country is called the People's Republic, it's usually a sign that it's not actually run by the people, nor is it a republic, and this was the case with Hungary at the time. It was a one-party socialist state and part of the Soviet Union. So, good old-fashioned communism. I'm really just kind of trying to paint a picture here of what her parents actually came from prior to ending up in the United States and meeting each other. The 1956 uprising was a revolution by the Hungarian people against the government, and there was a lot of violence that went down with that. So Joseph and Maria both immigrated to the US due to those issues. Although they immigrated at different times and they had both been married before back in Hungary, they ended up meeting by chance at a restaurant in California where Maria was a waitress. So this couple gets married and they have sweet, precious little Judith. And I mean, she was just really, really cute. Maria started preparing Judith to become an actress when she was very young, and at only 5 years old, Judith was discovered by a talent agent at an ice skating rink. And Judith really took to acting. She was just so cute and talented that she was getting roles right off the bat. And Judith also happened to be very tiny, even for her age. She was just really petite. So directors would be casting her in roles much younger than her actual age. Like, even at 10 years old, she would be playing the roles of 7 and 8-year-olds. Her first role was playing Kimberly McDonald in Fatal Vision, which there's a bit of cruel irony with that role that I will get into at the end of this video. In her career, she was in over 70 commercials. She had guest stars on TV shows. She was in movies like Jaws: The Revenge. She was the voice of Anne Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven, and she did the voice of Ducky in The Land Before Time, which was one of my personal favorite movies growing up. Joseph Barsi was a plumber by trade, but he had a pretty bad alcohol problem, and he would often stay home drinking rather than going to work. And he wouldn't let Maria work at all, so she seemed to put all of her time and energy into Judith's career while Joseph pretty much mooched off of her success. By 1985, Judith on her own was earning around $100,000 a year, which adjusted for inflation is about 280K today. So that was damn good money, and her family was able to buy a pretty decent three-bedroom home in the West Hills neighborhood of LA. But as Judith's career began to start to take off, her father's drinking got much worse, and as his drinking got worse, so did his abusive behavior. He was constantly threatening to kill Maria and Judith. Often he would threaten Maria that he was going to kill Judith and then himself so that she would be left to suffer. He was even arrested on 3 separate occasions for drunk driving. In December of 1986, Maria reported his threats and abuse to the police, but since they were not able to find any physical signs of abuse, Maria eventually dropped the charges. After this incident with police, Joseph reportedly stopped drinking, but he continued with his threats and abuse towards Maria and Judith. At the start of her career, Judith was described as a happy, bubbly little girl, but as the abuse got worse, her behavior began to deteriorate, as often is the case with children who are suffering in this kind of environment. Some of Joseph's more common threats were telling Maria and Judith that he was going to slit their throats and burn the house down. Right before Judith left to go to the Bahamas to film Jaws: The Return, her father threatened her that if she didn't return, that he would cut her throat. Judith's agent, Ruth Hanson, said she witnessed Joseph say to Judith, Remember what I told you before you left. And when he said this, Judith became terrified and she started crying. Judith got back from filming 2 months later and the violence continued. One time, Maria bought Judith a kite, which Joseph tried grabbing from her, and when she tried to protect her toy from him, he called her a spoiled brat and broke the kite into pieces. Judith was under so much stress from the constant emotional and physical attacks that she started plucking out her eyelashes, pulling out her hair, and plucking off her cat's whiskers, which this is common in children that are being abused. Friends would say Judith complained about her home life and told them she was afraid to go home and that her dad was miserable, he was drunk every day, and that she knew he wanted to kill her mom. Neighbors said that Joseph was constantly talking about wanting to kill his wife and that he'd killed Judith too. Which, what the fuck, neighbors? Like, seriously, they should have called CPS or something. I mean, I can't believe his neighbors knew so much about this and did absolutely nothing. Many people in Maria's life tried to help her, but she was always refusing and would turn down going to stay at a friend's house for her safety. By May of 1988, Judith was really starting to break down mentally. Her agent had scheduled her for an audition, but she just started crying hysterically and was unable to speak. So Maria scheduled Judith to see a child psychologist. The psychologist ended up reporting Judith's case to social services. Maria told social services that she had plans to divorce her husband and move out of the family home. And this was sort of true. Maria did seem to be planning on leaving Joseph. She had rented an apartment, and her and Judith would spend their days there before going back to the family home with Joseph at night. But Maria just couldn't quite find the courage to move out permanently, despite her friends urging her to do so. Judith was last seen riding her bike on July 25th, 1988. That very night, Joseph went into Judith's bedroom. He put a .25 caliber pistol behind her ear, then proceeded to shoot her at point-blank range. Then he shot Maria in the hallway after she heard the gunshot and tried rushing to save her daughter's life. Joseph spent the next 2 days wandering around the house. He even called Judith's agent during this time and told her he was going to move out of the house for good. He just wanted to say goodbye to his little girl first. Then he proceeded to pour gasoline over the bodies of Judith and Maria and set them on fire before going into the garage and shooting himself in the head with a .32 caliber pistol. On August 9th, 1988, Judith and Maria Barsi were laid to rest at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Judith's last role was as the voice of Ducky in The Land Before Time. It was released after her death, and her signature line, "Yep, yep, yep," was engraved on her tombstone. In a cruel twist of macabre irony, Judith's first role in Fatal Vision would turn out to be her own life's story. Fatal Vision was about the real-life case of Green Beret doctor Jeffrey McDonald, who is still serving life in prison for murdering his pregnant wife and 2 young daughters. Kimberly was his oldest daughter that ended up being played by Judith. That case was so bizarre, and I really didn't know what to think by the end of it, but I did cover it in the last episode, so be sure to watch it, like, subscribe, follow me on social media for more true crime and horror stories. And given the events of this case, I will say that as someone who has been in an abusive relationship myself, please get help and get out. There are shelters and plenty of networks that help keep abuse victims safe, and especially if you have a child, because no child deserves to grow up in an abusive situation. And certainly no child deserves to have their life ended because of an abuser. Anyways, be sure to follow me for more horror stories. Love you guys. Bye.